All right. So this is what we were able to get last time, right? You know about strings now. Okay, now the next concern is now I'm going to look at another set of another collection called a map. So as the name, yeah, we are mapping something to another thing. Basically, that's what we are doing. Um, so you see so far, when we are adding items to a list, let me clean this comment. So when it was list, let me use comment to change something. If it was a list, we would have done fruits and then we'll do square brackets and then the index, right, to get the item at the fourth position. That's like the index 3, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, so that's the fourth position. So this is what we have done with sets. And then for with list, this is for list, you have to get an item with a list. And then this one is how to get an item with within a set, right? Within a set, but this one is within a list. But then what if it means that you need to know the position of the item you want. You need to know the position of the item you want in the list or in the set before, so that you can fetch the index. So that you can fetch the index and use that index to um, get the item, right? So yeah, it's a list. It may contain various, a lot of multiple sort of things, a lot of stuff, right? So you have to actually go and locate what that thing is. Try to count and know the index before you can access it. Then we have another way of, instead of just accessing the item by trying to find out their indexes, why don't we actually label each item so that we can call them by the label we give them, right? By the label that we give them. That's when the concept of map comes in, right? So for example, so if I want to keep an item in such a way that let's say mango is fruit one, right? So I'll do fruit one. This is the name of the label, like question colon, then I'll write mango here, right? So I know that okay, this is a mango, right? Or I can put it, so this is the fruit inside. Then another thing I want to do, let's say I want to do tea, right? So I know various ingredients, so I have ingredients variable. And then the first one is, so um let me say milk. I'll be using milk, right? And the milk that I will be using is nido, right? The milk that I will be using is nido. Another thing is let's say sugar, right? Sugar, or let's say sweetening agent. Let me say sweet agent, right? Sweet agent, let me do underscore agent. No, let me use the uppercase, sweet agent, right? Let me say like sugar. That's a sweet agent that I want to add. Then let me say the liquid portion, so I want to use water. The liquid that I'm using in this case is water, right? So you can see that I can change the milk from nido to um peak milk, right? The peak milk. So these are, this one allow me to know that okay, I need to use milk, right? But the specific milk, the actual name or the actual value of that milk is this one. The switching agents, I can change the sugar to honey, right? The value can change. Then the liquid, I can change the liquid to, instead of water, I say hot water. Can be cold water, whatever you want to add, right? So here, if you want to access the items, right, we now call them like this. I now call them like this. So let's say if they are all in a variable called ingredient, right? I'll say ingredients. Then I'll use the index of the way I call list, right? I use list. And instead of putting index here, I'll call the label for that item I want. So for example, I want to access the liquid. So it's a string, so I'll say liquid. And then this one is going to print the hot water for me, right? So if I want the milk, I'll just change this thing to milk, right? So basically we are labeling each item and then matching it with different values. So we are mapping each of them. So we are mapping them to values. So these are the actual data that you have that you want to access. This is the actual data that you want to manipulate. But against them, you give them your own human readable labels so that you can access them within the collection. So this is a milk, and the actual value of that milk, the milk that we have here is a peak, is peak milk, and then the sweet agent is honey or sugar. Based on, you can change the value, but then the label is the same. And then the liquid you are having hot water, cold water, or just simply water or warm water. So it can be anything that you have there, right? So now let's have see this in the section of map. How do we actually do that? So if you are coming from another programming language concept, or you are coming from Python, what we are basically doing is we are using dictionaries. We are using dictionaries. So let me comment these guys here so that we work with something else called maps. So we are going to work with maps now. Okay, so working with map, right? We need to actually say, we need to do map, you know, map. Where is my keyboard? Map, right? Within the map, we need to also specify something. It's map with capital M. Sorry, it's map with capital M, and then we need to always bring this. We need to bring these um arrows, open and close arrows. Then ingredient. The name of the variable is ingredient. I want to. So you use the um you need to use the set curly bracket, just like dictionary in Python. You have to use curly bracket, not the square bracket when we are doing a map. It is the same as the way we do it for set over here, but then the difference is that instead of just having the item inside them directly, we need to label each item first. Now, the labeling and the content should also be of, you need to know their data types, right? The labels, what you are going to label them, right? What you are going to use to label them against the data type of the label against the data type of the actual value should be what you put here. You see, for set, we just put set string, right? Because it's a set of string values. But in a map, we are going to label, right? And against each label, you need to associate the actual item or the actual value. So you need to give two data types here. The first one come is for the label, and the second one is for the data type of the actual value. So here I want to map string, comma, string. It means that my label my label for each item is going to be a string, and then the data type, the actual values is also going to be a string. So here I can do the first item. So let me open the bracket so I can write line by line for you, right? So you see I open the bracket from here to here, right? So that I can write and make more sense for you. So the first item is that we had was mark, right? So it's a string. So string is in quotation mark followed by semicolon, right? Then the string, the value is also a quotation mark, which is peak mark, right? This is what I entered over here, comma. The next one. So the next one, before we go to the next item, they are all separated by a comma, like how we did it. The next item is label is sweet agent, and the sweet agent has the value of honey. I can change it to sugar. There's another item that I want to enter. That's instead of switch liquid, right? Liquid. So this size, these ones on the left are the labels, and then the ones on the right are the actual value, the actual value that you are looking for, right? So we have those three. Okay, so there's no next value. So I have my map finally done. So we have that all the labels on the left side of each line. So this is this guy. So the ones over here, the labels here are of type string, and the ones each item over here is of type um string as well. So each of them is a string as well. So let's try to access them. So I'm going to uncomment this guy and use print around it so that that print will actually print the actual value for us. So yes, so we are printing the ingredient, and in the ingredient we are printing liquid. So let's try to run it and see what will come. So let's come here. That main was that. So it's printed hot water for us because we are accessing the liquid, right, among the ingredient. The liquid in the ingredient, the actual value there is hot water. So we are using that label to call it. Instead of using the index, we are using that label that we gave it to call the actual value. So yes, that's how to access it. We can change it to, we can try to call them mock, right? So instead of, so mock here, right? Oh, the thing ran away. Yeah. So we'll call them mock here. So you call the pick because it's pick mock. The mock is mock, right? So it's pick mock for us. And yes, so what if we enter something that is not inside, it's not label, it's not having any label, right? This one mirror, there's no label called mirror inside this particular ingredient. So if you call that, it's going to say now, it's going to return a now. If it is not found, it is going to return a now, meaning that nothing is empty, it doesn't exist. That particular label does not exist. So that's what we have at this case. So now we need to come back to the data types. So what if I change one of the labels to number? So I'll change it to 3. See what happened? Yeah, the type it can be assigned of the map string. So we see the data types here of the first side, the ones on the left here, is for the labels, and the labels should all be string, not number, right? So if I want it to be number, I need to change this to int. If I change it to integer, it means that these guys are not going to be accepted. So I'm going to do call this one 1, call this one 2, right? So when I come here, I cannot call them with null again, right? So let me try and call them with mock first and see. Let me clear this, and then we run this. It's going to return now because there's no label of that value, right? If I put this and I put 1, you may think that we are expecting pick like the first one, but then it's also now because this is a string. The number here is a string. We entered, it should be an integer like we entered over here. So it should be an integer. So we'll go back, remove the quotation mark because it needs to be then I end that. So I have the pick now because now it's an integer against string map, integer against string map. So you can see for each of them it's a string against map, a string against map. Okay, so that's how to access the item instead of, if instead of working with list where you have to worry about the index. Okay, now what if these ones I want them to be different, but it can depend on anything. The label can be anything, right? So that's when you come with dynamic. So you see dynamic, that's how it does. So the labels can be anything. I can say street agent here. So you see it's accepted because these guys can be dynamic. The labels are dynamic. So if I go here, let me clear this thing again. If I go here and run this, pick is run, then let me go to switch agent, switch agent. We have Annie that is printed for us because we changed the data types from dynamic. So the same thing can be applied to the this side. So if I'm expecting an integer at this point, so it means that all my values should be integers. So 1, so this one, let me put a value here for the Annie is supposed to be an integer there, and this guy is to, this one is also supposed to be an integer there. So if I call the, so it's now 6854 because it's a dynamic as in against integer map. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind. Now, but in most applications, right now we are going to build mobile app. To build a mobile app, we are going to transfer data over the internet, right? And mostly through HTTP. And HTTP, most of the format that they use is a JSON format. JSON format is JavaScript's kind of way of object notation, where each object is noted as a dictionary. So you mostly be working with map when you're transferring data, especially between backend and the front end. And the backend usually retains the data that is already always in a map format. So you need to go assess the value of the content of the map, right? The content of the dictionary. Look at the labels available and look at the values, right? Then you come to the front end and you make sure that the map matches whatever it is. But generally, right, the general format that we have is string, right? The labels are mostly strings. And then the values can change. The value can change to dynamic. So this one, let me change it to name. So let's say first name. You are taking a value from the backend, right? That is like taking user data. Then first name, last name, for example, and then we are going to enter here is an email. So this is how you have organized it. So first name, last name, right? It's dynamic because the content here is dynamic because sometimes you may not having you may be having someone's data a data based on the how the data is coming from the backend. It's an amount. So an amount of the person has given the data is about amount of 0.023.0, right? But then if you go to first name and last name, first name is a name of a person, right? So let's say Rose, then last name. So let me just enter some Johnson Johnson. So you can see first name, last name, and the amount is this. So is verified. This person is verified. Is verified. Then you say true. So the person is verified true or false. So you can see that we have string data type as values, we have amount as values, and we have bool as value. Or these are all dynamic, but mostly the labels are usually string. But then we keep dynamic here when we are comparing because those values from the backend can change. Don't expect every content here to be of the same data type. So we use dynamic because that one can change and it doesn't depend on that. It depends on what data is coming from the backend, and you are to know that and handle it very well. So map is popularly used in applications, right? Especially through this communication that you have. And then when you want to access each item, remember to call the name of the variable where you store them. And then you call them as if you are going to put the index here, but we don't use the index in this case. We use the label that we have given it. And that's how a map also works.